Welcome to Void of Rules, where nightmares have no boundaries. In this channel, we explore the darkest corners of horror that most dare not enter. Every video takes you deeper into the shadows where forgotten terrors wait. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers by year's end. The void hungers for new souls. And now, let's dive into the void. The thrust of the engines finally died away, leaving only the hum of life support and navigation systems. After 3 days of travel, we'd reached our destination, high orbit around the dark side of the moon, where Cabin Theta waited for us like a forgotten sentinel. "There she is," Commander Phillips said, pointing through the viewport at a glinting structure barely visible against the star-filled blackness. "Home for the next 2 weeks." I stared at the abandoned space station. Even from a distance, something about it seemed off. Not damaged exactly, but somehow wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. The feeling of unease that had accompanied me since our classified briefing at NASA headquarters intensified. "Doesn't look like much," Rodriguez said, our flight engineer's voice carrying a forced lightness. "Hard to believe it cost billions to build." "It wasn't the construction that was expensive," Thompson replied, adjusting her glasses. "It was the quantum communication array." As our science officer, she was the only one who truly understood the experimental technology we were sent to retrieve data from. Phillips unbuckled from his crash seat. "Let's prepare for docking procedures. We've got work to do." None of us mentioned how strange our mission parameters had been, how the project files were heavily redacted, how our superiors avoided direct questions about why Cabin Theta had been abandoned so abruptly in 2013, or why, despite the supposedly routine nature of our mission, we'd all been selected specifically for our psychological stability and crisis management skills. I'd been working on the International Space Station when the call came. Deputy Director Harmon himself contacted me, explaining that my experience with quantum communication systems made me the ideal candidate for a specialized recovery mission. The pay was exceptional, but money wasn't what motivated me. It was the mystery of it all, the way Harmon's eyes darted away when I asked about the previous crew, the unusual psychological evaluations, the isolated training. "You'll be working with the best," Harmon had assured me. "Commander Elliot Phillips has more spacewalking hours than anyone in the program. Flight engineer Diego Rodriguez is a mechanical genius. And Dr. Olivia Thompson wrote the book on quantum entanglement communication." What Harmon didn't say, but what we all learned during our accelerated training, was that each of us had experience with crisis situations. Phillips had saved 3 astronauts during the Artemis II emergency. Rodriguez had single-handedly repaired a catastrophic hull breach on the Lunar Gateway. Thompson had maintained composure during the Europa probe failure when everyone else panicked, and I'd kept my cool when the experimental propulsion system I was monitoring nearly caused a station-wide meltdown. We weren't just qualified. We were selected because we kept our heads when things went terribly wrong. The docking procedure went smoothly enough, though the station's automated systems responded with noticeable delay. When the airlock finally pressurized, Phillips pushed through the hatch first, his flashlight cutting through the darkness beyond. "Power's out," he called back. "Rodriguez, you're up." "On it, Commander," Rodriguez replied, slipping past with his toolkit. I followed next, with Thompson behind me. The air smelled stale but breathable. Our lights revealed a thick layer of dust covering everything, expected after 12 years of abandonment. "What's that?" Thompson asked, her beam illuminating a metal container sitting conspicuously in the center of the entry chamber. Phillips approached it cautiously. The container was simple, military grade, with a NASA seal embossed on its lid. Inside was nothing but a plain envelope. "For Cabin Theta Recovery Team," Phillips read from the outside, then broke the seal. The 4 of us gathered around as he unfolded a single sheet of paper containing 5 numbered rules typed in official NASA format. "Rule 1, do not open door 6, even if it knocks. There is no door 6, Phillips read, his expression darkening. What does that mean? I asked. There is no door 6, but also don't open it. Phillips continued. Rule 2, between 2 o'clock and 2:10 AM UTC, speak only in whispers. If anyone speaks in a normal voice, do not respond, it isn't them. Rodriguez laughed nervously. Is this some kind of psychological test? Are there cameras? Rule 3, Phillips continued, ignoring him. If you hear static coming from your helmet when you're not wearing it, put it on. Someone needs to tell you something. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Rule 4, the figure in the observation window will not move unless you acknowledge it. Don't. Thompson's face had gone pale. What figure? Outside the station? And finally, Phillips finished. Rule 5, every 72 hours, recite your name, rank, and Earth coordinates into the mirror in Module C. If your reflection doesn't say it back, evacuate. Silence fell over us as we processed these bizarre instructions. This has to be a joke, Rodriguez finally said. Some kind of hazing ritual for the new team. No one mentioned this in the briefing, I said. Phillips folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket. Joke or not, we follow protocol. Sync your watches to UTC. Let's get the power restored, and then we can worry about these rules. Rodriguez managed to get auxiliary power running within 2 hours. Lights flickered on throughout the station, revealing a scene of rapid evacuation. Personal items remained where they'd been left. Coffee cups with long-dried residue, notepads with half-finished calculations, a framed photo of a smiling family. It's like they left in a hurry, I observed, picking up an old tablet with a cracked screen. The official report said there was a life support malfunction, Thompson replied, though she didn't sound convinced. Let's split up and check each module, Phillips ordered. Rodriguez, get main power online. Thompson, start inventory on the quantum communication equipment. Taylor, survey the living quarters and life support systems. I nodded and headed toward Module B, which contained the crew quarters. As I moved through the narrow corridor, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The station's layout was standard. Modules A through E arranged in a pentagonal configuration around a central hub. I found myself counting doors, relieved to confirm there was indeed no door 6 on any of the schematics displayed on the wall terminals. Module B was eerie in its abandonment. 5 sleeping compartments lined the walls, with personal effects still tucked into storage nets. I examined each one, documenting the state of the quarters. The last compartment belonged to someone named William Brooks, according to the name tag. Unlike the others, this one was completely bare, stripped of personal items. Even the bedding had been removed. I made a note of this anomaly and continued my inspection. The life support systems were functioning within acceptable parameters, but I discovered an unusual modification to the air filtration system. An additional filter had been installed, not standard NASA equipment, connected to a small device that appeared to be monitoring atmospheric composition. Phillips, I called over the comm, you might want to see this. The commander arrived a few minutes later, frowning at my discovery. That's not in the schematics, he confirmed. Any idea what it's testing for? I shook my head. The readings are nominal now, but there's a log. I pulled up the data on my tablet. It recorded several anomalous events, about a week before the station was evacuated. Spikes in an unknown atmospheric compound. Phillips studied the readings. Make a copy of this data, we'll include it in our report. He didn't say anything more, but I could see the concern etched on his face. By evening, we had established basic operations. Rodriguez had restored main power, though several systems remained offline. Thompson had begun analyzing the quantum communication array, reporting that while the hardware appeared intact, the data cores had been deliberately wiped. Not corrupted, she explained during our first team dinner around the small galley table. Wiped. Someone systematically erased everything before leaving. Why would they do that if we're here to recover the data? Rodriguez asked, stirring his rehydrated pasta without enthusiasm. Perhaps the data was the problem, Thompson suggested. Quantum communication experiments deal with entanglement, particles affecting each other across vast distances instantaneously. The theoretical applications are enormous, but there are risks. What kind of risks? I asked. Thompson hesitated. Purely theoretical, but some physicists have proposed that quantum entanglement, if manipulated incorrectly, could create connections that weren't intended. Connections to what? Phillips pressed. Or where? Thompson replied quietly. The multiverse theory suggests countless parallel realities exist alongside our own. Quantum entanglement might be a bridge. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. None of us wanted to connect that possibility with the strange rules we'd been left. The first night on Cabin Theta, I took the second watch after Phillips. The station creaked and groaned as thermal expansion worked on its metal skin. Normal sounds, but somehow amplified in the silence of lunar orbit. I was checking atmosphere readings when I first heard it. A knock. Faint but distinct. 3 raps in succession. I froze, listening intently, trying to identify the source. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. I followed the sound down the corridor toward Module E, which housed storage and the emergency systems. The knocking grew louder as I approached a section of wall between 2 supply cabinets. There was nothing there, just smooth metal paneling. But the knocking was unmistakable now, coming from directly behind the wall, where no door existed. My heart pounded as the first rule echoed in my mind. Do not open door 6, even if it knocks. There is no door 6. The knocking stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, I heard myself breathing too fast. I backed away, careful to keep my eyes on the spot. Nothing changed. The wall remained solid and doorless. As I continued my watch, I found myself drawn to the personnel files stored in the main computer. Most were encrypted, but basic crew information was accessible. I searched for William Brooks, the astronaut whose quarters had been stripped clean. The computer returned a strange result. Personnel file deleted by order of director, June 14th, 2013. Just 1 week before the evacuation order, when Rodriguez relieved me an hour later, I didn't mention the knocking or my discovery about Brooks. Something told me to keep both to myself, at least for now. The next morning, I casually asked if anyone had heard strange noises during the night. Phillips gave me a sharp look but said nothing. Thompson mentioned the station settling. Rodriguez was too busy getting the main reactor online to participate in the conversation. I've been looking at the station schematics more carefully, I said, changing the subject. There really isn't a door 6 anywhere. Modules A through E each have 1 main entrance from the central hub, plus emergency exits. That's a total of 10 doors, all numbered sequentially within their modules. Maybe it's metaphorical, Thompson suggested. A warning not to open something that shouldn't be opened. Or maybe someone's messing with us, Rodriguez called from underneath the console, where he was replacing circuitry. Like I said, hazing the new team. Either way, Phillips interjected, we stick to the rules until we have reason not to. That includes the Whisper Protocol tonight. As we worked through the day, I kept finding reasons to pass by that section of wall in Module E. It remained ordinary, with no indication of what I'd heard. I began to wonder if the isolation was already affecting my mind. During a break, I accessed the station logs, searching for any mentions of unusual occurrences before the evacuation. Most entries were routine, but I found a personal log from the previous commander that raised my concerns. Day 156, another noise complaint from Brooks, claims to hear knocking in Module E. Full inspection revealed nothing. Prescribed sleep aid. Atmospheric tests normal, but will continue monitoring. Day 158. Brooks reporting visual anomalies near observation window. Medical evaluation shows no ocular issues. Recommended psychological rest. Quantum array experiencing unexplained data fluctuations. Day 160. Implemented emergency protocol 7A following Brooks incident. Team cohesion compromised. Awaiting extraction authorization. The logs ended there. Whatever Protocol 7A was, it wasn't in any standard NASA manual I knew of, and the Brooks incident remained undescribed. At dinner that evening, Phillips reminded everyone about Rule 2. "It's currently 8:47 PM UTC, he said, checking his watch. "That means at 2 AM we follow protocol and whisper only for 10 minutes. "This is ridiculous," Rodriguez complained. But there was an edge to his voice that betrayed his nervousness. "We follow the rules," Phillips insisted. "All of them." "Even the one about a non-existent door?" Thompson asked. "Especially that one," I said quietly, earning curious looks from the others. I didn't share what I'd found in the logs. Something told me that knowledge might make things worse, not better. After dinner, we continued work on our respective tasks. Thompson seemed particularly absorbed in the quantum array, muttering occasionally about unusual residual entanglement patterns. At 1:55 AM UTC, we were all still awake, running diagnostics on the main computer system. The overhead lights dimmed unexpectedly at precisely 2 AM. "Power fluctuation," Rodriguez whispered, following the rule. "Check the readings," Phillips whispered back, pointing to the monitor. I noticed Thompson growing tense beside me, her eyes darting to the corners of the room, as if tracking something invisible. "Do you feel that?" she whispered, barely audible. "The air pressure changed." She was right. My ears had popped slightly, as if the atmospheric pressure had suddenly adjusted. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees as well. For 5 minutes we worked in hushed tones. The atmosphere felt charged somehow, as if the air itself was listening to us. Then, Rodriguez forgot. "The auxiliary coupling is showing critical stress levels," he said in his normal voice, eyes fixed on the readout. We all froze. According to Rule 2, we couldn't respond. "Did you hear me?" Rodriguez asked, louder now. "We need to address this now, or we could lose power again." None of us answered. I couldn't look at him directly, but in my peripheral vision, something seemed different about his movements. Slightly too fluid, as if his joints worked differently. "What's wrong with all of you?" Rodriguez demanded, voice rising with anger that didn't sound quite right. "Commander, we have a situation here." The seconds crawled by. Rodriguez continued speaking, his tone becoming increasingly desperate and then strangely flat, until 2:10 AM arrived. "Need immediate attention, or the consequences will be catastrophic," he was saying when Phillips finally responded. "Let me see those readings," Phillips said in his normal voice. Rodriguez blinked rapidly, like someone waking from a deep sleep. "What readings?" "The critical stress on the auxiliary coupling. You were just telling us about it." "I didn't say anything about that," Rodriguez insisted. "I've been trying to get this calibration sequence running for the past 10 minutes, and none of you would answer me." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Rodriguez had no memory of what he'd just been saying, and none of us wanted to be the first to acknowledge what had happened. "The monitoring system shows a gap in your biometric readings," Thompson finally said, pointing to a display tracking our vital signs. "For about 8 minutes, it couldn't detect your heart rate." Rodriguez stared at the monitor in disbelief. "That's impossible. I was right here the whole time." "Perhaps there was a sensor malfunction," Phillips suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. "Let's call it a night," I proposed. "We're all tired, and the systems are running stable for now." No one argued. As we dispersed to our quarters, I noticed Rodriguez examining his hands as if seeing them for the first time. I couldn't sleep. The incident with Rodriguez kept replaying in my mind, along with the knocking I'd heard the previous night. I accessed the station's internal camera system from my tablet, cycling through feeds until I found Rodriguez's quarters. He was sitting on the edge of his bunk, completely motionless, staring at the wall. I checked the timestamp. He'd been in exactly the same position for over an hour. The next day, tensions were high. Rodriguez avoided eye contact with everyone, focusing intently on his work. Thompson buried herself in analysing the quantum array, occasionally making notes in a private log she wouldn't share. Phillips maintained an outward calm, but I caught him repeatedly checking the emergency protocols on his tablet. I was assigned to conduct an external inspection of Cabin Theta's communication array. The EVA would take approximately 3 hours and would give me a complete view of the station's exterior condition. As I prepared in the airlock, Phillips reviewed the procedure with me. "Stay in visual contact with the station at all times," he instructed. "Maintain communication every 5 minutes. If you see anything unusual, report immediately and return to the airlock." "Anything unusual like what?" I asked, securing my helmet. Phillips hesitated. "Just anything that doesn't belong in space." The spacewalk began routinely enough. I moved along the exterior using the handholds, methodically checking each section of the station's hull. The communication array extended from Module A, like a complex antenna, its components gleaming in the harsh sunlight. I documented several micrometeorite impacts and signs of radiation damage, but nothing that would explain the station's abandonment. As I worked my way around to the dark side of the station, I noticed something odd about the hull near Module E, precisely where I'd heard the knocking. The exterior plates didn't align properly, as if something had pushed outward from within. I took detailed photos and samples of a strange, almost crystalline residue that had formed along the seams. Just as I was finishing my inspection, I glanced towards the lunar surface far below and froze. On the dark, airless surface of the moon, where nothing could possibly survive, a single light was moving. It wasn't the steady progress of a rover or any known human outpost. It moved erratically, like a searchlight being carried by hand, scanning the area directly below Cabin Theta's orbit. "Control, are there any active missions on the lunar surface?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Negative," Phillips replied after a brief pause. "All current lunar operations are on the far side. Why?" I was about to report what I'd seen when the light winked out. I scanned the area, but the lunar surface had returned to its normal, desolate appearance. "Just checking," I said finally, completing inspection now. When I returned through the airlock, I removed my helmet and set it on the prep table, while logging my findings. I decided not to mention the light. Without evidence, it would only increase the growing unease aboard the station. That's when I heard it. Static coming from my helmet's communication system. At first I thought nothing of it, assuming it was feedback from the station's systems. Then I remembered Rule 3. I hesitated only briefly before putting the helmet back on. "Repeat. This is Specialist Lawson. Do you copy?" A woman's voice came through the static. The name meant nothing to me. There had been no Lawson listed in Cabin Theta's previous crew manifest. "I copy," I responded. "This is Specialist Taylor on recovery mission." "Thank God," the voice said, relief evident despite the poor connection. "Listen carefully. The breach is wider than we calculated. The mimics are getting through." "Mimics? What breach? Who are you?" "No time," Lawson's voice became urgent. "Trust the rules. They're the only protection we could leave you. The reflection test is critical. When it fails, you must evacuate immediately. Do not trust anyone who fails the test, even if they appear normal." "What are these mimics? How do they—" "They replace you," Lawson interrupted. "They study, then they replace. The quantum experiment opened a pathway we never anticipated. A connection to somewhere else. Somewhere hungry." "Are you from the original crew?" I asked. "Original?" Lawson laughed bitterly. I'm from the 4th recovery mission. None of us made it home. I'm broadcasting through quantum entanglement from elsewhere. The connection is failing. Remember, door 6 is their entrance point. It doesn't exist in your reality, but they're making it exist. The silent period is when they're strongest, and the figure at the window is their scout. Once acknowledged, they know you can see them. How do we close the breach? I asked desperately as the static grew louder. You can't, Lawson's voice was fading. You can only escape before... The transmission dissolved into harsh static before cutting out completely. I tried for nearly an hour to re-establish contact, but there was nothing. Finally, I sought out Phillips and told him everything. Could be signal bounce, he suggested after listening impassively. Old transmissions sometimes get caught in unusual orbits and replay years later. That doesn't explain how they knew about the rules, I countered. The rules were left by the previous team. This Lawson was probably one of them. Then, why isn't she on the manifest? And she specifically said she was from the 4th recovery mission. We're supposed to be the first. Philip's expression hardened. That's classified information specialist. Focus on the mission. We're here to retrieve data, not chase ghosts. Something about his response felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint why. I resolved to keep a closer eye on everyone. I spent the next several hours reviewing station logs, looking for any mention of previous recovery missions. The official records showed none, but I found something strange in the maintenance logs. 4 separate airlock cycling procedures documented on dates when the station was supposedly abandoned, each exactly 6 months apart, each followed by several days of life support usage, then a final airlock cycle. 4 missions, 4 teams sent before us, none officially acknowledged. I was still processing this discovery when Thompson called an emergency meeting in Module D. I found something significant in the quantum array, she announced when we gathered. Her eyes were bright with excitement, but her hands trembled slightly as she pulled up a holographic display. The array wasn't damaged as we thought. It was deliberately modified to create a persistent entanglement field. She pointed to several components that had been altered. Someone wanted to maintain a quantum connection even after the primary experiment ended. Connection to what? Rodriguez asked. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he hadn't slept since the 2 AM incident. That's just it, Thompson replied. According to these readings, the connection is still active, but the corresponding entanglement anchor isn't anywhere in our solar system. It's not registering in our physical space at all. What does that mean? Phillips demanded. Thompson took a deep breath. It means they successfully established quantum entanglement with something outside our universe, something in another dimension, for lack of a better term, and that connection has remained open for 12 years. On our 4th day aboard Cabin Theta, Thompson made another discovery that changed everything. I was helping her catalogue equipment in Module D when she suddenly stopped, staring out the observation window. "Taylor," she whispered, "there's someone out there." I looked up and felt my blood turn to ice. Framed perfectly in the large observation window was a figure in what appeared to be an unmarked spacesuit, standing motionless against the backdrop of stars and the dark lunar surface far below. It was impossible. We were in high orbit, and there was nothing outside the window that could support a human form. "Don't acknowledge it," I said quickly, grabbing Thompson's arm. "Remember Rule 4. "How is that possible?" she asked, her scientific mind clearly struggling to process what she was seeing. "There's nothing out there. It's standing on vacuum." The figure wore what looked like a standard NASA EVA suit, but with no identifying marks or insignia. Its faceplate was dark, revealing nothing of what might be inside. Most disturbing of all was its perfect stillness. Not even the subtle movements that would come from a human maintaining balance, just absolute, unnatural immobility. "Don't look at it directly," I warned, pulling her away from the window. "Let's find Phillips." When we reported what we'd seen, Phillips insisted on verifying for himself. We returned to Module D together, and sure enough, the figure remained exactly where it had been, facing the window. "It's not showing up on any sensors," Phillips noted, checking a handheld scanner. "No mass, no heat signature, nothing." "But we can all see it," Thompson countered. "Maybe that's the point," I suggested. "Maybe it's not physically there, but connected through the quantum entanglement field Thompson discovered. A visual manifestation of whatever is on the other side of the breach," Thompson agreed, her scientific curiosity clearly overriding her fear. "Whatever it is, we follow Rule 4, Phillips ordered. No one acknowledges its presence or attempts communication." But over the next few hours, Thompson kept finding reasons to return to Module D. Each time, the figure remained exactly where it had been, motionless, facing the window. It became clear she was growing obsessed with it. "I've been taking measurements," she confided in me later that evening. "It hasn't moved a millimeter in 4 hours. That's not possible for a human, even in a spacesuit." "Thompson," I said firmly, "you need to stop observing it. The rule specifically says not to acknowledge it." "Rules based on what data?" she countered. "This could be the breakthrough we need to understand what happened here. Maybe it's related to the quantum communication experiment, a physical manifestation of entangled particles across dimensions. Or maybe it's exactly what the rules are trying to protect us from," I said. "That figure at the window, the knocking from nowhere, Rodriguez's behavior during the silent period. They're all connected to whatever came through the breach Lawson mentioned." "You don't know that this Lawson person was even real," Thompson argued. "It could have been a hallucination or some kind of automated message. Then how do you explain 4 undocumented recovery missions? How do you explain the rules that perfectly predict these phenomena?" Thompson had no answer, but the determined look in her eyes worried me deeply. She was a scientist to her core, and the lure of discovery was clouding her judgment. That night, I was awakened by a station-wide power failure. Emergency lights cast red shadows across my quarters as I scrambled to investigate. I found Phillips in the command hub, trying to restart systems. "Where's Thompson?" I asked, noticing her absence. "Module D last I saw her," Phillips replied without looking up from the console. My stomach dropped. I raced through the station to the observation window, calling Thompson's name. Module D was empty. The window showed nothing but stars and empty space. The figure was gone too. "She's not here," I reported when I returned to Phillips, "and I can't find her in any of the other modules either." "Rodriguez," Phillips called over the comm. "Any sign of Thompson?" "Negative," came the reply. "But I've found something strange in the station logs. The previous crew reported similar power failures before their evacuation." I joined Rodriguez at his terminal, reviewing the logs he'd uncovered. They detailed a pattern of escalating anomalies, power fluctuations, communication disruptions, and most disturbing, crew members reporting duplicate sightings of their colleagues in impossible locations. "What does it mean, duplicate sightings?" I asked. Rodriguez looked up, his face pale. "It means they saw each other in 2 places at once." We searched the entire station twice more, but Thompson had vanished completely. Her bunk remained untouched, her equipment laid out for the next day's work. "Could she have taken one of the EVA suits?" Rodriguez suggested. Phillips shook his head. "All suits are accounted for, and the airlock logs show no activity. None of us said what we were thinking. It was impossible for Thompson to have simply disappeared from a sealed space station, yet she was gone." "We need to check the quantum array," I finally said. Thompson was convinced it was still maintaining a connection to somewhere. If she was right, and if she somehow activated it. The array, housed in Module A, appeared undisturbed at first glance, but as we approached, I noticed the control terminal was active, running a program none of us had initiated. "She was attempting to reverse the entanglement polarity," Rodriguez observed, examining the code. She was trying to close the breach. Did she succeed? Phillips asked. Before Rodriguez could answer, the terminal screen flickered and a video feed appeared. It showed Thompson, still in her station uniform, staring directly into the camera. But something was wrong with her eyes. They were completely black, with no whites or irises visible. "I can see everything now," she said, her voice flat and wrong. "So many worlds, all stacked together like pages in a book. So many versions of us, living and dying across the multiverse." The three of us stood frozen, watching in horror. "They've been waiting for so long," Thompson continued, "waiting for a door to open. We opened it with our arrogance, our meddling with forces beyond our comprehension, and now they're coming through." "Who's coming through?" Phillips demanded. Thompson's face split into an unnaturally wide smile. "Everyone. No one. The between. Things that exist in the spaces between dimensions. They're so hungry after being trapped for so long. They feed on possibilities, on potential futures, on consciousness itself." The screen went black, leaving us in stunned silence. The following day, Rodriguez began acting strangely. I found him staring blankly at a wall terminal, mumbling under his breath. When I asked if he was all right, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. "I can hear them in the walls," he said, talking in between the frequencies. His behavior deteriorated rapidly after that. He stopped sleeping entirely and began avoiding both Phillips and me. I caught him speaking to empty rooms and noticed he'd stopped eating. Most disturbing of all, I overheard him one night whispering what sounded like geographic coordinates, but not for any location on Earth I recognized. Phillips and I discussed evacuation options in hushed tones while Rodriguez was supposedly running diagnostics in Module A. "We're not leaving until we retrieve the data," Phillips insisted. "That's the mission. Thompson is gone, Rodriguez is losing his mind, and we're following cryptic rules left by people who evacuated in a hurry," I argued. "Something is very wrong here." "All the more reason to complete the mission quickly and depart," Phillips countered. "Besides, we need to test Rule 5 before we can make any decisions." He was right. According to the 5th rule, we needed to perform the mirror test every 72 hours. That deadline would arrive in less than 6 hours. I spent those hours documenting everything I'd discovered: the knocking, the figure at the window, Thompson's disappearance, the evidence of previous recovery missions, and Lawson's warning. If something happened to me, I wanted there to be a record. I also began formulating an escape plan. The station had an emergency evacuation pod attached to Module E, designed to return a single occupant to Earth orbit where rescue would be possible. If the mirror test failed, I needed to be ready to leave immediately. When we confronted Rodriguez about his behavior, the situation exploded. He lunged at Phillips with a screwdriver, his movements unnaturally quick. I managed to kick his legs out from under him, and together Phillips and I locked him in a storage compartment. "Let me out!" Rodriguez screamed, pounding on the door. "They're in here with me. They've been here all along." His screams eventually subsided into unsettling whispers. Then, after about an hour, complete silence. "Should we check on him?" I asked Phillips. "Not until after the mirror test," he replied grimly. "We can't risk whatever happened to Thompson happening to us." When the 72-hour mark arrived, Phillips went first. I waited outside Module C as he entered the bathroom containing the only full-length mirror on the station. "Elliot Phillips, Commander. Earth coordinates 28.5383 degrees north, 81.379, 2 degrees west." I heard him recite clearly. There was a long pause, and then Phillips said, "All clear." He emerged looking shaken but composed. "Your turn," he said. As he passed me in the doorway, I caught his reflection in a polished panel on the opposite wall. For just an instant, it seemed to move out of sync with him, turning its head a fraction of a second too late. I froze, my mind racing. According to Rule 5, if your reflection doesn't repeat your words back to you, Evacuation is necessary. Phillips had claimed his test was successful, but what if it wasn't? What if whatever had happened to Thompson was now happening to Phillips? Problem, not Phillips asked, his tone casual but his eyes too intent. Just tired, I lied, entering the bathroom and closing the door behind me. My hands shook as I faced the mirror. My reflection looked normal, if terrified. I took a deep breath and spoke the words. Alexis Taylor, specialist. Earth coordinates 47.6062 degrees north, 122.3321 degrees west. My reflection stared back at me silently, head tilted slightly as if curious. Its lips didn't move, it didn't repeat a single word. My blood ran cold. According to Rule 5, I needed to evacuate immediately, but with Rodriguez locked up and Phillips potentially compromised, I was effectively alone. The reflection's lips curled into a smile I wasn't making. It raised its hand to the mirror surface, pressing against it from the other side. I stumbled backward, nearly falling into the shower compartment. As I watched in horror, the reflection's appearance began to change subtly, the eyes darkening, the skin tone shifting to an ashen grey. It was still recognizably me, but wrong in countless small ways. I forced myself to exit the bathroom normally, finding Phillips waiting right outside. "All good?" he asked. "Yes," I lied. "Everything's normal." "Excellent," he smiled. Something about the way his teeth caught the light seemed wrong. "We should check on Rodriguez now." "Actually," I said, thinking quickly, "I'm worried about the data retrieval process. The corruption rates are increasing. I'd like to start the backup sequence in Module A." "I'll come with you," Phillips offered. "No need," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Someone should monitor Rodriguez. I'll call if I need help." Phillips agreed too readily, and I felt his eyes on my back as I walked away. Instead of going to Module A, I doubled back through the maintenance shaft toward my quarters. I needed to gather essential supplies before making my way to the evacuation pod. In my compartment, I quickly packed a small bag with emergency rations, water and my tablet containing all my documentation. As I was about to leave, I noticed something on my bed that hadn't been there before. A small, handwritten note. The handwriting was cramped and shaky, as if written in great haste. "Not alone, others hiding. Meet in maintenance shaft 4. E. Trust nothing that fails the test." I stared at the note, my mind racing. Who could have written it? Was it a trap or evidence that someone else aboard Cabin Theta had survived? The station suddenly groaned around me, the metal walls creaking as if under immense pressure. I pocketed the note and slipped out of my quarters, moving as quietly as possible toward maintenance shaft 4E. It was a narrow utility corridor that connected Module E to the central hub, rarely used and not monitored by internal cameras. As I crawled through the tight space, my flashlight illuminated decades of dust, undisturbed by human presence. If someone was hiding here, they must have been extremely careful not to leave evidence of their passage. I had nearly traversed the entire shaft when my light caught a seam in the wall that didn't match the schematics I'd memorized, a concealed panel. I hesitated, then tapped lightly on the metal. 3 quick taps, then 2. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then came a response. 3 taps, then 2, from the other side. The panel slid open, revealing a space that shouldn't have existed. A small room, perhaps 6 feet square, had been constructed in the void between the station's double hull. Inside, a woman in a tattered NASA uniform sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by makeshift survival gear. "Taylor?" she whispered, squinting in the light. I lowered my flashlight. "Who are you?" "Lawson, Dr. Evelyn Lawson." Her face was gaunt, her hair cropped unevenly close to her scalp. "You spoke to me through the helmet." "That's impossible," I said. "You were broadcasting through quantum entanglement, from another dimension." She gave a hollow laugh. "Is that what they told you?" "No," I've been hiding in the walls for 6 months, using the station's communication system whenever I can risk it." I stared at her in disbelief. 6 months? How have you survived? And why hide? "Come inside," she urged. "They can sense movement in the open areas." I squeezed through the opening, and Lawson sealed the panel behind me. The hidden room was cramped, but ingeniously constructed, with salvaged life support equipment providing air and water recycling. Food rations were carefully stacked in one corner. "I was part of the second recovery team," Lawson explained, offering me a water pouch. "We arrived 8 months ago, just like you, 4 specialists sent to retrieve data from the quantum experiment." "The log said there were 4 recovery missions before us," I said. She nodded grimly. "All official records were erased. They keep sending teams, and they keep losing them." "What happened to your team?" "The same thing that's happening to yours," she said. "We found the rules too, but we didn't take them seriously at first. Adams, our commander, heard knocking on the 3rd night but ignored it. The next morning, we found a new door where none had been before." Her voice cracked. "Adams opened it. Something came through that looked like Adams but wasn't. After that, the others started changing one by one." "The mirror test," I murmured. "Phillips failed it." "Then he's one of them now," Lawson confirmed. "The quantum experiment didn't just establish communication with another dimension, it created a persistent tear in reality, a doorway that allowed things from the other side to come through." "The mimics," I recalled from our earlier communication. "That's what we call them," she nodded. "They study us, then replace us. They can appear identical in every way, except during the reflection test. The original crew discovered this and created the rules as a warning, but by then it was too late for them." "What about the silent period? And the figure at the window?" "The tear in reality widens at specific intervals, synchronized with this station's orbit. 2 o'clock to 2:10 AM UTC is when the breach is most open. The mimics can control anyone who speaks during that time." She rubbed her face wearily. "The figure outside is their scout. Once you acknowledge it, once you show that you can perceive their reality, you become a target." "Thompson," I whispered. "She kept watching it, studying it." "And now she's gone," Lawson finished. "Probably replaced, like Phillips." "What about Rodriguez? He's been acting strangely but differently than Phillips." "Some people don't get replaced, they get connected. The mimics establish a partial link, feeding off their consciousness while allowing them to remain physically present. It drives them insane." I processed this information, connecting it with everything I'd observed. "We need to evacuate. The escape pod..." "Won't work," Lawson interrupted. "I tried 3 months ago. The navigation system has been compromised. It directs the pod into deep space, not back to Earth." "Then how do we escape? There must be a way." Lawson's expression hardened with determination. "There is. I've been working on it for months. The quantum array that created the breach can also close it, but the process requires precise timing and someone on both sides of the breach." "Both sides? You mean..." "Yes, someone has to go through, then activate the closure sequence from there while I initiate it from here." The implications were staggering. "You're talking about sending someone to another dimension with no guarantee of return?" "I've established limited communication with someone on the other side, another scientist who understands what's happening. They've agreed to help, but I need someone to physically transport the closure device through the breach." "Through door 6, I whispered. She nodded. "It's the only direct access point. The door appears in different locations, but its nature remains the same." "How do you know this will work?" "I don't," she admitted, "but I've traced the station's power fluctuations to energy being siphoned by the mimics to maintain the breach. If we disrupt that energy flow from both sides simultaneously, theoretical models suggest the breach will collapse. I considered our options. Staying meant eventual replacement or madness. The escape pod was sabotaged. NASA wouldn't send a rescue mission for days, by which time we'd likely all be compromised. I'll do it, I decided. Tell me what I need to know. For the next hour, Lawson briefed me on the plan. She had constructed the device using components from the quantum array, a disruptor that, when activated in the dimension on the other side of door 6, would desynchronize the entanglement field, maintaining the breach. She would simultaneously execute a similar disruption from our side. The window of opportunity is narrow, she explained. Once you're through, you'll have exactly 10 minutes to reach the anchor point and activate the disruptor. How will I recognize the anchor point? It will appear as a distortion similar to heat waves over hot pavement, but with a bluish light. The scientist I've been communicating with will guide you there. And after I activate it, Lawson hesitated. In theory, as the breach collapses, you should be pulled back to your origin point. In theory, I repeated. It's a risk, she acknowledged, but staying here guarantees a fate worse than death. As we finalized the details, a sudden bang reverberated through the station, followed by an alarm. Atmospheric breach in Module E, the automated system announced. Emergency protocols engaged. Rodriguez, I realized. They must have checked on him. We need to move now, Lawson urged. The disruption will distract them, but not for long. We gathered the equipment and slipped out of the hidden compartment, making our way through the maintenance shaft toward Module A, where Lawson had prepared the quantum array for our plan. The station's emergency systems were engaged, bulkheads sealing automatically to contain the breach. Red warning lights painted the corridors in an eerie glow as we moved, careful to avoid detection. The breach is a distraction, Lawson whispered as we approached Module A. They know something's happening. They can sense disturbances in the entanglement field. The quantum array looked different from when I'd last seen it, reconfigured with additional components that Lawson had salvaged from around the station. She quickly connected her tablet to the main console and began the initialization sequence. I need 3 minutes to calibrate, she said. Then we'll have to find door 6. How? It appears in different locations. It appears wherever the breach energy is strongest, she explained. Right now, that's probably near where Rodriguez was being held. As Lawson worked, I monitored the station's security feeds on a secondary screen. Most cameras were offline due to the emergency, but one in the central hub was still functioning. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. Phillips and Thompson were both there, moving with an unnatural synchronization as they interfaced with emergency controls. But most disturbing was Rodriguez, or what had once been Rodriguez. His form seemed unstable, flickering between his human appearance and something else, something that hurt my eyes to look at directly. Lawson, I called urgently. They're in the central hub, all 3 of them. She glanced at the screen. The physical manifestation is progressing faster than I've seen before. The breach must be widening more rapidly. Calibration complete, a tablet announced. Let's go, she said, disconnecting the device and handing me a small metal object the size of a smartphone. This is the disruptor. Once you're through, press the activation sequence I showed you. No matter what you see or hear, don't deviate from the plan. We moved cautiously toward Module E, using maintenance passages to avoid the central hub. The station's structural integrity was compromised. Sections of the walls were bulging inward or outward, defying physics. In some corridors, the light bent around corners it shouldn't have been able to reach. As we approached the area where Rodriguez had been contained, I felt it, a pressure change, as if the air itself was thicker, near a section of wall that didn't align with the rest of the corridor. There, Lawson pointed. Where there had been solid wall hours before, a door now stood, unmarked. But we both knew what it was. Door 6. Remember, she said, gripping my shoulder, 10 minutes. Find the anchor point, activate the disruptor, and pray the collapse pulls you back. I nodded, unable to speak past the fear tightening my throat. I'll initiate the disruption sequence from this side as soon as you're through, she continued. If all goes well, Cabin Theta will be destroyed in the process, but the breach will be sealed. What about you? I asked. I've lived in these walls for 6 months, she said with a grim smile. I've made my peace. Before I could respond, a distorted voice echoed down the corridor. We know you're there, Lawson. It was Thompson's voice, but wrong, multi-layered, as if multiple voices were speaking, in unison. We've always known. Go, Lawson urged, pushing me towards door 6. Now! I gripped the disruptor device and reached for the door handle. It was ice cold against my palm. As I pulled it open, a rush of air that smelled of ozone and something alien pushed past me. Beyond the threshold was not a room or corridor, but a twisting passage of what looked like overlapping realities. Multiple versions of the station corridors superimposed on each other, stretching into darkness. 10 minutes, Lawson reminded me, already turning to face the approaching threat. She pulled a makeshift weapon from her belt, a repurposed cutting tool turned into a laser cutter. I looked at her one last time. I'll come back for you. Close the breach, she replied. That's all that matters now. With a deep breath, I stepped through door 6 and into the impossible space beyond. The door swung shut behind me, cutting off Lawson and the world I knew. The rules that had guided us suddenly seemed distant and insufficient for the reality I now faced. Around me, physics seemed optional. Gravity pulled in multiple directions simultaneously. Fragments of Cabin Theta appeared and disappeared as I moved forward, like walking through a shattered mirror where each piece reflected a different version of the station. Hello? I called, my voice echoing strangely. Is anyone here? I was told someone would guide me. We've been waiting for you, Specialist Taylor, a voice responded. My voice, but not quite. From the twisting corridor ahead emerged a figure that looked exactly like me, but with eyes that reflected no light. You're not the scientist Lawson mentioned, I stated, clutching the disruptor device tighter. Perception is fluid here, my duplicate said, smiling with too many teeth. But no, I'm not your ally. I am what you would become, should you remain. I need to find the anchor point, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Of course you do, the duplicate agreed, just as all the others did. Follow me, if you wish, or don't. It makes little difference in the end. I had no choice but to follow, keeping a careful distance as the duplicate led me deeper into the impossible geometry of the breach. Time felt strange, elastic and unreliable. I checked my watch repeatedly, trying to track the passing minutes, but the display kept changing, showing different times with each glance. We passed through spaces that resembled Cabin Theta, but distorted. A galley where food floated upward instead of falling. A command center where computer screens displayed human faces, contorted in silent screams. A sleeping quarter where the bunks folded in on themselves in geometrically impossible ways. Why are you helping me? I asked the duplicate. Helping? No. It laughed, the sound reverberating unnaturally. This is entertainment. You humans are so predictable, yet each thinks their attempt will somehow differ from the last. Lawson seemed to think this plan could work. Lawson, the duplicate mused. Yes, there have been many versions of Lawson. Some still hide in the walls, others became like me. A few even believed they'd found salvation. A chill ran through me. What do you mean, many versions? The duplicate stopped, turning to face me fully. Time works differently here. The breach doesn't just connect dimensions. It connects timelines. Your Cabin Theta has been breached countless times across countless realities. Sometimes you're Taylor, sometimes you're Phillips or Rodriguez or Thompson. The names change, but the story remains. That's not possible, I protested. Isn't it? Why do you think the rules were waiting for you? They're a message you've been leaving yourself. Across dimensions, across time. A warning that always comes too late. My head spun with the implications. If what the duplicate said was true, then this cycle had played out repeatedly. Different crews, different attempts to close the breach, all ending in failure. The anchor point, I insisted, checking my watch again. According to its constantly shifting display, I had anywhere between 3 and 7 minutes remaining. Take me there now. As you wish, the duplicate sighed, clearly bored. It's just ahead. We entered a vast chamber that defied the physical constraints of Cabin Theta. It stretched for what seemed like miles, yet somehow fit within the station's dimensions. At its center hung a pulsing blue distortion, exactly as Lawson had described. The anchor point, the duplicate confirmed. The tether that holds our realities together. Destroy it, and you destroy the connection. I approached cautiously, feeling the disruptor device growing warm in my hand. As I drew closer to the distortion, I could see images flickering within it. Snapshots of Earth, of space, of places I didn't recognize. Fragments of realities connected by this unnatural bridge. Why do you need us? I asked the duplicate, who had followed me to the center. Why replace humans? Need is the wrong concept, it replied. We don't need, we expand, we experience. Your consciousnesses are vessels that allow us to interact with your reality. Without you, we are limited to observation. You're parasites, I said. The duplicate smiled again. Symbiotes, perhaps, though your kind rarely survives the process intact. I stood before the anchor point, disruptor in hand, finger hovering over the activation sequence. What happens to you if I succeed? If, the duplicate laughed, you won't, but in the infinitesimal chance that you do, we would be inconvenienced, forced to find another crossing point. The multiverse is vast. Breaches occur naturally. This one was simply convenient. I thought of Lawson fighting to give me this chance, of Thompson who had disappeared, of Rodriguez whose mind had been corrupted, of all the crews before us who had fallen victim to this invasion from beyond reality. With sudden resolve, I pressed the activation sequence on the disruptor. The device hummed to life, emitting a high-pitched whine that seemed to vibrate at a frequency that disrupted the very air around me. Interesting, the duplicate observed, stepping back. You actually believe you can change the outcome. The anchor point began to pulse more rapidly, its blue light intensifying. I could feel a corresponding disruption on the other side. Lawson had begun her part of the plan. Disruptor at 30%, synchronization, announced the computerized voice from the device. Breach integrity, destabilizing. The chamber around us trembled. Parts of the impossible architecture began to collapse in on themselves. The duplicate's form flickered, its appearance shifting rapidly between my face and something else entirely. Persistent, it hissed, no longer sounding amused, but futile. Even if you close this breach, we are already among you. Phillips, Thompson, they walked back through door 6 before you arrived. They return to your Earth even now. Horror washed over me. Lawson hadn't known. We had focused so much on closing the breach that we hadn't considered mimics already on our side escaping before the closure. Disruptor at 60% synchronization, the device continued. Warning, dimensional instability increasing. Recommend immediate evacuation. The duplicate's form was becoming increasingly unstable, portions of it stretching and twisting in impossible ways. You cannot win, Taylor. This game has been played too many times. Maybe, I acknowledged, but I can change the rules. I pressed a secondary sequence on the disruptor, a self-destruct protocol Lawson had mentioned as a last resort. The device grew scorching hot in my hand, but I held on. Modified sequence detected, it announced, recalibrating disruption field. Warning, recursive collapse imminent. Point of origin no longer secure. The duplicate's expression changed to one of genuine surprise. "What have you done?" "Change the outcome," I replied, through gritted teeth. "If I can't go back, I'll make sure you can't go forward." The anchor point was now a swirling maelstrom of energy, pulling in the surrounding environment. The duplicate was being drawn toward it, its form stretching like taffy. "This will destroy you too," it warned, struggling against the pull. "I know." The disruptor reached critical synchronization. The chamber buckled around us as reality itself seemed to fold inward. I closed my eyes, thinking of Earth, of home, of a sky I might never see again. Then the world exploded into blue light. I was falling, tumbling through a kaleidoscope of broken realities. Fragments of Cabin Theta, pieces of Earth, slivers of worlds I couldn't identify, all rushing past me as the breach collapsed. I caught glimpses of familiar faces: Thompson, Phillips, Rodriguez, Lawson, but distorted, multiplied across countless variations. Then, abruptly, impact. Cold metal against my face. The familiar hum of life support systems. The smell of recycled air. I opened my eyes to find myself sprawled on the floor of an escape pod. Not Cabin Theta's, but something similar. Emergency lights pulsed red around me. Through the small viewport, I could see debris floating in space. The remains of what might have been a space station. The pod's computer was active, running a pre-programmed emergency return sequence. On its screen, a message flashed. "Breach contained. Return trajectory calculated. Estimated arrival, Earth orbit. 36 hours. Good luck, Taylor. Lawson." Below it, a handwritten note had been taped to the console. "The rules have changed. Warn them." As the pod carried me back toward Earth, I began composing my report. Not about Cabin Theta or the quantum experiment or the breach. Those were lost now, destroyed in the collapse. But about the mimics that had escaped before the closure. About Phillips and Thompson wearing human faces but carrying something else behind their eyes. About the new rules that would be needed now that the invasion had moved to Earth. And about Door 6, which no longer existed in space but might appear anywhere the mimics desired to create another breach. The knocking started 16 hours into my journey home. Faint at first, then more insistent. Coming from the outer hull of the escape pod, where nothing could possibly be. I close my eyes and whisper the first rule to myself. Do not open Door 6, even if it knocks. There is no Door 6. But something is knocking anyway,